It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critics' Kingdom. Hello, everyone. We are back here with another episode of the Critics' Kingdom. And this week, we are actually going to do the Aly Michalka drama. DCOM, I guess you could call it. Now You See It. Starring her and Johnny Bakar, that came out in 2005. I'm sure you remember it. I know, Nina, you said that you really enjoyed it. I know I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was definitely another one of those that I watched whenever it was on. As I was rewatching it, I was like, oh, I used to think Johnny Bakar, who plays the character he plays as Danny, I was like, I used to think he was super cute.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like a magic kid. Well,
Yeah.
I enjoy. I'm a magic kid. I didn't do tricks. That was never me. But I enjoyed. I've always enjoyed fantasy. It's something I'm realizing now in my older years that, like, wow, like, this is actually a genre that I've been very interested in since I was a small babe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I think, like Twitches, like, Disney Channel didn't do many straight up sort of fantastic Disney Channel original movies, and I can think of, like, Twitches, maybe, like, The Other Me, like, things where, like, sort of magical-esque things happen.
Yeah.
And this was one of them, so I definitely clung to it, for sure, whenever it was on. Don't know how I feel now.
we can get into that.
Yeah.
We can get into that. With that, do you want to give us kind of a rundown of what happened?
Of course, Chelsea, I would love to. So, we begin the movie, and it's being narrated by Allison, who's played by Aly Michalka, and, she's in what looks like a college dorm room, specifically a Harvard dorm room, because she's wearing a Harvard sweatshirt. And she,
in case y'all didn't get that.
Yeah, in case, Girl's super smart. That's what they're trying to tell you at the very top.
Right.
And she is essentially telling us that she's about to tell us a story about something unbelievable that happened, but she swears it's real. Like, she swears it's true. And so she goes into the story about how, essentially, she was participating as a teen segment producer for a new children's reality competition show that was being, put together and hosted by this, I guess, renowned magician, Mystic Max. And the idea was that they were looking for, like, the next great kid magician.
Mm-hmm.
So she applied for it, and, in order to apply to even get into the application page, like, you had to figure out, like, the secret code in the poster and the flyer that was announcing the competition. So that's how they, it's like the SAT, how they weed out the undesirables, whether or not that's okay. But so she gets in. We get very early this idea that this is going to be something that's very rooted in, like, puzzle solving, and they talk a lot about how magicians use misdirection and, just sleight of hand to sort of trick your eye into seeing something that isn't actually happening, or that there's more to that's going on. So as a segment producer, she's paired with a cameraman and an adult supervisor named Paul, and they go off into the Midwest in search of the next great kid magician, and she has to find a really great candidate for the competition, and that's the only way that she can be on the show. And she's, like, super, like, classic, overeager, overachieving child.
Yep.
So she really wants to get this. So they go on this search, and everyone that they meet is sort of a bust, and then they finally meet this kid, Danny, who's their last hope, who it seems like he is a bust as well. He's trying to make doves appear out of a balloon that he's popping in his room, and nothing happens. And so they leave, and they're like, oh, well, like, I guess we're not going to be able to be on the show. But then when they open the trunk of their car, a bunch of doves fly out of the back, and they're like, oh my goodness, that was so crazy, that was such a crazy trick, and they got it all on camera. So they're able to convince, the actual producer of the show that all of this is, like, he's a really, really good magician, and Danny gets into the competition. They get into the competition, and they all go and move into the Magic Mansion where the competition is being held for an undisclosed period of time, but I would assume maybe a week and a half. And something in that, since they're all minors, you know. And so they begin the competition. There are 2 other candidates besides Danny, and essentially in the first competition, they're given like 5 items, and they have to come up with something interesting and creative with those 5 items. Danny manages to do something like kind of crazy cool and like make all the items stand up and sort of swing around, and just like it's dynamic and kinetic, and it's seeming, and he didn't know what he was going to do before because Allison kept pressuring him like, what's your trick going to be? What's your trick going to be? And he was like, girl, let me work. And that's what he came up with. But he's sort of like not disqualified, but he loses points because like in addition to everything on there, like technically there's snow, and that's an extra ingredient. But then, like, another contestant comes up to do his trick, and he says he needs an assistant. Danny assists him, and they're kind of, you know, at war with each other to a certain degree, and he ends up... Well, that person ends up on, like, a spinning wheel, disappears and ends up on a spinning wheel, and that person doesn't know how that happened. And Danny, like... pretends like, oh, it's a great trick, but like he doesn't really know how it happened either. No one does. So now Allison is super suspicious, and Hunter, who's another of the like teen segment producers, is also super suspicious, and they're like sneaking around at night trying to see if there was a trap door or something like that. And essentially we just get the idea that like something weird is going on with Danny, and Max is watching him super hard. Very creepy. So the next competition that they have to do is based on, like, they each get a famous magician. Danny gets Harry Houdini, and they have to perform their most famous trick. So it involves a bunch of research, and they have a library at this huge mansion, because it's the mansion of this guy, like, DeMilo, who was, like, a famous magician in his own right. And it's supposed to be filled with, like, all these hidden chambers and, like, a bunch of, like, really cool books. But when Danny's doing research, he's like, I can't find anything in these books, or these books are all, like, so basic. They just have, like, the standard information. And Allison realizes that some of the books have a special marking on them. And she's like, we have to put all these books together. So they end up, like, assembling them and seeing that it creates a certain image. And that image leads them on, like, a wild goose hunt through the castle. Mm-hmm. That ultimately takes them to, like, DeMilo's secret library in this vault created by Disney that the children keep returning to. Throughout the film. And so we find the secret library, and, you know, this will eventually be helpful. But at the next competition, Danny is supposed to make an elephant disappear, like that's what Houdini's most famous trick is, and instead he makes a mechanical bull appear on stage. Mm-hmm. And Hunter is like, that's not a trick. He got magic. He got powers. And it's a whole problem. Like, we got to get him off. It's not fair that he has powers. Everybody else is just working with normal stuff. And Max is like, obviously that's absurd. Like, the boy doesn't have powers. He's just a really good showman. And Danny is like, oh. And he obviously, like, you know, he's freaking out about it. They decide that they're going to put him, like, in front of, like, essentially like a trial in front of a panel of, like, magical elders and experts.
Allegedly.
To determine whether or not he has magical powers.
They definitely got a psychic from off the street.
and before it, so he's, like, super worried about the trial, and Allison comes up to him and is, like, trying to, like, help him feel better, and he admits to her that he, like, since he was 13, he's been able to just do things, or, like, make things happen. Like, all of a sudden, like, he sees a skateboard, and then he wants it, and all of a sudden it's under his feet, and he's riding it, and he doesn't understand why he can do any of those things. So she's like, oh snap, he really is magic. And at the trial, he sits on a chair, and the chair ends up, like, levitate. He's like, they're like, prove to us that you're magical. And so he's like, let me think about something. And then he starts to levitate. And they're like, oh my goodness, you're magical. And then Mystic Max is like, hold on now. And shows them that the chair is, in fact, like, a prop created by another magician from, like, years and years and years ago. And he essentially just says, like, Danny is crazy good at, like, misdirection and illusion. He does his homework. Like, he's just a smart kid with a lot of ability, but, like, he's not eliminated from the competition because, like, he's just really good at it. So we're going to keep him in.
Ho's mad.
Right? But, like, Allison is like, like, that's weird, and she's, like, starting to just notice weird stuff, so she's doing her own sort of investigation on the side, and, you know, so she goes back to the tape of the doves that Danny made appear, and she realizes that they literally appear out of thin air on that tape. So then she starts sort of, like, her intention is to go through, like, DeMilo stuff to, like, find out things about, like, sorcerers and, like, real magic and all of that stuff. And in that process, she ends up, like, overhearing Max talking to Danny separately in a room, and Max essentially being like, listen, man, I know you're magical. I'm magical, too. I'm a sorcerer. You're a sorcerer. I can help you. Wear this ring, and this ring will control your powers. Like, it'll keep you from doing anything wild and we'll begin our training. And Danny's like, yes, a mentor, love, support, goes off about his business. But then immediately after that, lo and done, Paul, her adult supervisor, who has been lurking this whole time in various shadows and corners, literally comes to meet Max and is like, did you give him the ring that will steal his powers? And Max is like, yes, I did. Soon he will be mine. And so she records all of that, and she, like, tries to convince Danny, but Danny's like, I finally got a friend, yo, and I don't feel like a freak. Like, let me live my life. And then she tries to, like, run with the tape that she has to the, like, main producer and show it to her, but Max happens to be there, and he comes out of the corner like, oh, yes, let's see. And they let him handle the tape, and he, like, clearly does some magical thumb erasure, and the tape is just white noise. So she's kicked off the show, and she sort of has to go off on her own. But she's, like, still really concerned about Danny, because now she's grown to, like him as a friend, and, like, cares about him to a degree. And she does more research about DeMilo and learns that he was killed doing one of his, like, most common tricks, and she sees that he died wearing that ring. So she's like, oh no, like, that's what's gonna happen to Danny. He's going to murder Danny on stage on national television. So she goes to try to prevent that, and she's telling Danny, like he needs someone else to take off the ring, but he's performing on stage, and for some reason they feel like nobody can just go on stage and, like, remove this ring from this boy. Yeah. So he's, like, doing his trick. It almost kills him, but he manages to jump out the way.
Because she warns him.
Exactly. She's like, yo, get out the way. And then Max is, like, now they're doing this weird tug of war where they're trying to, like, without saying it to the audience, like, destroy each other on stage. And Allison, like, ends up on stage because he's like, oh, I need an assistant. And they end up bringing her on stage, and Max tries to kill her with swords. Doesn't manage to do that. But then she's able to take his ring off, and he uses the ring to... It's very unclear. It's some sort of dimensional transfer situation. Yeah. The man goes poof.
Yeah, literally
Max
poof.
Disappears off the stage.
In, like, a cloud of smoke.
In the cloud of smoke. And, you know, and I guess Danny maybe wins the competition. I don't really know. But the point is that...
No, it gets shelved. That's why she has all the tape.
Yeah, because everybody's like, we don't know what happened. Mystic Max has, like, never been seen.
And now he's disappeared.
Exactly. So they, like, never put the show on. And so then we go back to her in Harvard, and she's like, oh, okay, so all the tapes were shelved, but I managed to get them, and I've spliced them together to show the world. Even though Danny is literally in hiding right now. He went into hiding because he was like, I don't know where Max is and what might happen to me if Max shows up. So I'm going to go in hiding and hone my sorcerer powers so that when our final showdown happens, which is inevitable, we will be able to, you know, scrap. And I will be prepared. And she's like, but I don't know where he is. And then the popcorn bowl starts floating. She's like, I promise. And then she gets snapped into, we don't know where. They on the park bench. And it's her and Danny, and a hat is thrown at the screen. Right. And that's how the movie ends.
And we'll be right back with the review. So, to get into the review portion, I will say, I feel like this movie did not live up to our childhood expectations of how good it was.
I had such fond memories that were... And I just question now. I question them. I question my taste as a child.
I mean, in 2005, we were maybe, 12? 11?
Exactly. I was old enough to know better. You know?
But before 15, it's all just a mess.
That's fair.
That's my general rule. But yeah, I do definitely think that this one was a lot less was going on than I think I thought when I was a child. Yeah. Also, the carefully placed Disney vault throughout the entire... Because, like, if you guys watched TV and all the commercials when we were little, you will remember that Disney would do those commercials, like, every couple months where they'd be like, we're taking this movie out the Disney vault, but only for a month, and then it's gonna go right back in. And the vault looks exactly like the Disney vault from those commercials. I was like, I'm triggered, because I completely forgot that was even a concept that you can't even do now.
Yeah, back in the... It was like a thing of like, oh, you want Snow White? You better get it January
get the 20th remastered version
2003.
Right, get the 21st century remastered version of Fantasia.
And it's going back in the vault. You ain't never gonna see it
on VHS only for a month in your local Walmart. Like, it's just like this is why kids wear Supreme these days and they understand drops. I'm telling you, like, that is the reasoning behind that. Because
they're like, it
wild
really is.
Concept.
They're not gonna do it again. They're not gonna restock this. That's not how it works.
But yeah, the Disney Vault as a concept was wild.
But it's sold though. Like, they knew you can
scarcity always sells.
Yeah, when you can only do it when you have a product that you know people are actually interested in.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's also the thing of like the House of Many Rooms. Like, these children whose like lives are dedicated to like creating illusion for the entertainment of other people,
right? Who
are trapped in a house of many rooms and many secrets. It all feels a little too much of art imitating life for me personally.
I also love that they put him in the Merlin room, which, you know, if they wanted to hit it over the head anymore.
He's a wizard! You're a wizard, Danny. That's literally what they told him in the film. It was kind of entertaining. But, like, yeah, I think with that, I think something that we sort of talked about, Chelsea, is that, like, the fact that this came out in 2005, and it's the height, like, I would argue that that's at the height of, you know, sort of the magical fervor of the early 2000s, or the 2010, like, the aughts? Not the aughts. Of the aughts. Uh-huh. Like, Harry Potter movies were coming out. Mm-hmm. And we're like...
We were in the middle of that.
Yeah, we're just, like, wrecking box offices. And, like...
Lord of the Rings had just ended, like, a year or two before, I think. Return of the King came out in 2003, right? Or 2004?
Yeah, somewhere in that.
Yeah.
And, like... It was just a period of time where, like, fantasy seemed to be having a lot of its day.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was just a lot of... Like, I even remember in particular this movie, The Covenant, about, like, these, like, this warlock coven. Where one of them, like, goes rogue. I can't remember the specifics.
I remember the commercials.
But it was, like...
I never watched it.
It predated, like, vampires. It was, like...
Yeah.
Before we got, like, ooh, the hot vampire, it was, like, hot witches. Like, people were ready to capitalize on that as a concept.
Hot magical peoples.
Exactly. And the art, like, you know, you can make an argument that it sort of paved the way for the more niche and, like, the darker, like, more horror-driven vampiric situation that took over, like, in later years and ended up doing a lot of the 2010s. Or the early 2010s. But the point of all of this that I'm trying to make is that this is definitely, I see this as a Disney Channel original movie response to that trend that was developing. And so that would therefore make a lot of sense as to, like, why I definitely enjoyed it as a kid. Mm-hmm. But upon rewatching it... Literally, like, I know, like, the best that you can draw from this is, like, trust in your abilities, trust in your own perceptions of the world, trust in what you see, what you feel. Don't let anyone tell you that what you feel isn't true, or that you, like, it isn't something you should believe. Like, believe as you need to with your heart and trust in, like, yourself. Right. Now, the thing is, everybody did better. And they did better for multiple decades. Like, Narnia did it better.
Yeah.
Harry Potter did it better. Lord of the Rings did it better. The Covenant did it better. Like, all the other movies, they did better. So, I mean, you know.
Yeah. I think what I said when we were watching it, I was like, I think somebody gave the director that Aly Michalka was very popular at this point because she had her and her sister's group, Aly and AJ, which the kids loved, Potential Breakup Song, and Into the Rush. God, those, like, dominated during this era. But then she was also, like, Phil of the Future.
Yeah.
Like, she was a big Disney star at this point. So I feel like somebody was like, write her own vehicle.
Yeah.
And this was that. And now, is it a successful vehicle? I don't know. There were very odd angles. There were very odd angles that were used. This was also directed by our king, Dwayne Denham. This is like the rare miss from him for the DCOMs, I will say. But you know, we all have bad days. It's fine. He may have phoned this one in. He just wanted the check.
I don't know if I think the premise of it, it's just like the stakes are so low.
They are.
They're so, like, I literally genuinely don't understand. Like, we don't, like, know for a fact that, like, Max is trying to, like, steal his powers or, like, kill him to, like, it is technically the second act of the film, but it doesn't show up till, like, the last, like, less than 40 minutes of the film.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, it feels super late, but then also, like, it's not, there are no stakes to that. It's not like Max gonna take his powers and, like, destroy the world.
Right.
It's like, Max just wants his powers and might kill...
So he can be powerful.
And we don't even know that he's gonna kill Danny until, like... Again, like, I mean, it's happened soon after that, but, like, we don't even understand immediately that, like, he'll murder the child.
Right.
It's like, it takes us a minute to get that information, too. So you're just like, I don't, like, okay. Also, why wouldn't you believe her? Like, why would she lie about that? And then at the end, you're like, I just don't understand. Boy, you know that somebody else got to take the ring off. That's all that has to happen.
He was being so dumb.
I was like, why would you literally... So dumb. Like, homegirl is in the wings. Like, why don't you just walk over to that side of the curtain and put your hand...
Do a little, like, you know...
Hello, can I have an assistance from the audience? Please remove my ring. Like, that's it. That was the whole thing that needed to happen.
We were literally sitting there just like, there's no reason that this part of the movie needed to play out this long. Because it was just like, but there was no stakes. So it was like, why don't you just tell your mom, take off this ring, mom?
Like, she's in the, you see her right there.
In the audience.
Your dad is clapping so loud. You don't think that he'll do anything you tell him to do right now?
Good God. Yeah, I think the problem is the world building was not very good at this one. I feel like that's also, though, a general problem with a lot of DCOMs, and I kind of get it because, again, the whole thing is a very low-stakes venture.
It's like, they're not out here, though, like, it really is, it's just, they're like, we're literally making TV movies for children.
Yes.
We don't have to invest anything in the creation of this.
Yes.
And it would literally be a waste of money to, like, give it a lot of care and attention.
Arguably, the best world building I ever think they did was a non-fantasy movie, which is Cheetah Girls.
Yeah.
Not 2 or 3. But the first one, they
3.
build the world of, like, you're in New York very, very well.
And they build Halloween Town pretty well.
Yes,
Halloween
that's
Town
another
gets
one
really, like...
that they do very well. Mm-hmm.
But those are, like, the theme movies, they're good with that. But this is weird. I think that this is a theme that they, weirdly enough, didn't... It's very strange because, like, you know, you think about, like, Fantasia and all of the... Like, mm-hmm. Disney literally built its capital on, like, exploiting magical stories.
Yes.
Like, that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all Snow White, all, like, exploring the magic of the fairy tales.
Yeah.
And it's weird that they were incapable of, like, actually building the world for this.
When that was the assignment.
And, like, you literally have all of the source material
mm-hmm.
comes out of your studio. So it's a little... I mean, maybe it's because it's live action, and they had to do it live action magic on a budget,
mm-hmm.
which, like, you want, like... So, you're not trying to use no CGI or special effects or, like, visual effects. Like, you want it to be super, super... Simple.
Yeah.
But they didn't...
They just did it.
Yeah,
they just did it.
That's the best way to, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also just, I don't know, it's like, I feel like with all the magical stuff that was going on, then you could have done a much better version of this, because I'm like, there's really no reason that this should not have just been the kids' version of The Prestige. The Prestige came out a couple years after. Or a year after, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, that book had been around for years. Like, I'm like, somebody literally should have just been like, why don't we just, loosely adapt?
And we know that y'all love to do that.
Right.
Like.
And people always do it, you know? Or, like, just take a story and slightly twist it and, like, do it for kids. I don't know. But, yeah, the world building could have been a lot better in this one overall. One of the other things that we noticed that we found funny was the whole Harvard thing, because it was just extremely unnecessary.
There was no relevance of her location in, like, I'm telling you this story. Mm-hmm. Like, there was no reason why it literally couldn't have just been her bedroom. Like, she could have literally been anywhere. She could have been in a library. She could have been in the secret library.
Yeah, she could
And we would have been like, okay.
Tales from the Crypt. That would have been fun.
You know what I mean? It wouldn't have...
We own the
wouldn't have been,
now.
because it had absolutely no influence on anything that happened in the story. Also, there's no point where it's like, oh, I'm doing this for my college application.
Right. It was so weird. And you cannot tell me that they just randomly had that girl wearing a Harvard shirt, because it didn't make sense.
It didn't make any sense. Like, that feels like one of those things that was probably written in the original script when it was, like, flushed out before they made cuts, because they were like, budget.
Right.
And they somehow decided, and the writer, like, fought for that, and they, like, kept it in that form. They're like, fine, we'll put her in a room and we'll dress the dorm. But, like... no bearing on the story whatsoever.
It was just so... oh, gosh.
But maybe, maybe the single reason the single reason we can create for it existing is to justify all of the bounds and leaps of logic that these children make in the span of 15 seconds to, like, be able to solve these puzzles.
That's what they were trying to hint at. I was like, are you guys literally trying to say that, like, that's all Harvard kids do, is just make these wild-ass connections?
Yeah, or just, like, this level of... Because it's not even, like, divergent thinking. It's just, like... Also, the concept that, like, in the thing of a puzzle, like... For example, at the top, she talks about how, like, she's describing the puzzle that you had to solve on the poster. And she's like, if you look at it, like, there's a spider web, which obviously is a website. And then the book that he's holding says A Farewell to Arms. And then she literally goes, the book that he's holding says A Farewell to Arms. And everyone knows the most famous armless statue is the Venus de Milo. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, if I saw A Farewell to Arms, like, and I am also an Ivy League grad, like,
She's a Yale League?
Like, my first thought would never be like, oh yeah, statues with no arms. Obviously. No one's first thought is that.
Maybe this is saying something about you, Nina.
And you're right, it was a fault.
This is why you didn't go to Harvard.
I knew it. I felt it. I remembered it from that. I was like, yeah, nah, that place isn't for me. I can't do that kind of thing.
She understood it at a basic level that she's like, nah, these bitches ain't for me.
I was like, and also, like, the fact that, like, that is correct. And, like, not even, like, it's the statue then. It's the statue led her to think about, what was his name?
De Milo.
Something De Milo, who was a famed... It's like, I don't, like...
We're making a lot of connections here that your average 15-year-old would not be making, or 16, whatever.
Like, we jumped a lot of hoops to get here, and it all just happened to be right.
Right.
Like,
I thought he was going to say she was wrong.
Exactly. Like, every time it happens to be just right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when they're in the library, and he's reading books, and she picks up maybe 2 books, and she's like, some have markings, and others don't.
I see a pattern.
Like, what? Like, you can't see a pattern with 2 things in front of you. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not a pattern yet.
It's not a pattern.
That's crazy.
She's making all those scientific guesses.
It's like they really do play this, like, wild leaps and bounds game. And I'm like, you know what? Like, as a kid, I definitely was like, oh, because as a kid, I was a puzzle kid. I'm still a puzzle kid. Like, I love doing puzzles. I have puzzles up in my house. One of a lion's head. It's shaped like a lion's head. It's excellent. It's so cool. Took me days, but it was wonderful. But, like, yeah, that's just not how logic puzzles work. Like, it's not that specific. Like, even the New York Times crossword isn't that specific. You know, it does call on, like, it has, like, it is niche knowledge, but it's niche knowledge that makes sense.
Yeah, they were clearly trying to imply something, and then you're watching it as an adult, and you're like, whoa. This literally does not make any sense.
Like, what if we put a farewell to arms, and that brings... Like, they clearly worked backwards. They were like, we need to get to DeMilo. So they worked backwards from that, but it's like, boo-boo. Like, what does... Because a farewell to arms... Like, what does Hemingway have to do with Venus? Like, off the cuff.
Yeah, no, if you're just like, how do these two things connect?
Exactly. Like, you could have chose... And, like, how did you expect the children to figure that one out?
Literally, 10 to 16. That's what they said. How did you expect a 10-year-old to figure that out?
So crazy.
No, this whole thing was like...
So wild. It did definitely feel like adults trying to write, like...
Yeah. I could feel them writing.
Children. Yeah, it was really...
You could hear the dialogue, which I absolutely hate.
What did she say at some point? She was like, that's not... Or...
She said, not oh my word, but it was just something that was like...
Where you were like, what?
I can see somebody writing. I can see somebody typing out a final draft. Like, exactly. I was like, I can hear it click-clacking. In 05.
And, like, forgetting that people have to say these words.
Right.
Like, this is not something that you read, my dear.
And she's actually not a bad actress, considering, but, like, I'm like, if we got to the point where I can hear the dialogue from her...
Oh, Lord.
Dark days.
Dark days. So there was that. And then, like, just the whole mystic... Mrs. Max was creepy. Paul was mad creepy. There's literally a moment where Paul... straight up, like, if you're watching the frame, like, she's trying to tell... So she leaves the place after she gets the thing, tries to tell Danny immediately in the courtyard, because that makes logical sense. Like,
ironically, she's not very smart.
Exactly, like, do all these leaps and bounds, but... Like, why did you hand Max the tape? Did you think that Max wasn't gonna do something to the tape?
Yeah.
Did that make any sense? But, so she's talking to Danny... And he, and, like, you see in, like, it's one of those, you know, 2-shot frames. Mm-hmm. So, in between the spaces of their heads, you literally see, like, she mentions Max. And Paul literally pops up from the space in between them, lurking. But, like, it was one of those things where I was watching, I was like, okay, so was this actor, like, straight up kneeling on the ground and then got his cue to
had so many questions.
Because he did not walk up behind them.
It wasn't that. It was literally, like, the man popped up.
No,
like, one of the PAs was like, get up! From the side of the set!
It's so funny. It's so funny. But, yeah.
There's also a lot of aggressive angles and, like, close-ups in here.
Yeah.
That I was just like, what is happening?
It was like an attempt to build tension, but I know that you know how to do that better, Dwayne. So what's going on?
Yeah.
That's
that part, I was like, okay, I see that I know you, like, did Twin Peaks and, like, directed some of that, so, like, I can see the vision. It does not work for this, though.
It doesn't. I literally wrote down as you were watching it that, like, the angles they're using are very aggressive, and this film, to me, felt like the Blair Witch Project meets The Mummy Returns. Mm-hmm. Which is not something that anyone wants or has ever requested, nor that we ever need to try to do in this world. So,
it actually might have honestly been a better film had they just done the guerrilla style filmmaking, like full Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, or just like and they had all of the tools to do
that. They
really
did,
because you could have literally just been in Cedric's camera the whole time. They underused that child.
They really did. Poor Cedric.
Like, you could have just been in Cedric's camera the whole time, and it would have worked a lot better. But, yeah, it did feel like they were just, like, trying to, like... It was really, like, an overdone script.
Yeah.
It felt like.
It felt
but
overwrought.
Without any substance.
Yeah. I feel like you could kind of tell that this probably went through a lot of network rewrites.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
for sure.
Which, again, you never... Like, I'm like, again, when you start hearing the dialogue... You're just like, yeah, one of y'all, somebody came with either too big of an idea and y'all were like, make it smaller, minimize, or something clearly happened and somebody had to rewrite or whatever. Y'all got a lot of notes.
Yeah. Just like that one
notes.
with the 6 writers on it.
Oh my god.
Yo, if you ever see 6 writers on the credit of anything...
Was that Teen Girls 3?
No. That was the one that should have been Tales from High School, but was called something else. Frenemies.
Oh,
just run. Just run in the other direction. Just turn the TV off.
Yeah.
Don't
do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself.
We only get so many hours on this earth, y'all. Just, you know? And nobody can tell you how much you have, so you're really taking a gamble.
Right.
You know? I'm just saying. But yeah, it's... Yeah, that's the film. It wasn't...
That's the film. It's true, though.
That's the movie. It definitely... I do wonder if the Jesse Eisenberg movie, Now You See Me, of 2013 was inspired by this.
I'd be interested to know that.
Both in title and general premise, it is the same. So
with much better graphics.
There's that. Yes, of course. So there's that. They make a great joke in here about Donald Trump's... I love that Donald Trump's hair was still a joke in 2005. I think, Chelsea, you brought that up as we were watching it.
Mm-hmm.
You said that. It was facts. They literally bring it up when they were talking about, there are some things that we just can't explain.
Right.
Like Donald Trump's hair. That was a pleasant thing to see. But, yeah, that really is about it.
Yeah. So, Nina, would you show this one?
There's so many better things for us to watch about magic. So many better things.
Yeah.
This is not... if they in their search of magic things stumble upon this, sure. But we'd probably watch The Black Cauldron before we watched this.
Oh, God, I used to really like that movie.
I actually really liked it, too. But upon rewatching it as an adult, I do understand why it maybe didn't do very well. It's
because it wasn't Disney, was it?
It is Disney, but it's super
it's
dark.
early Disney, right?
It's not early Disney. It was when they were
80s.
having, they were in that weird lull, and they were trying to get everybody back on their side.
The 80s was a weird time for Disney,
and they were taking a lot of chances, and that was one of the chances, and that's why they didn't let Tim Burton stay. That's not he wasn't involved in that, but they were that's why when Tim Burton had all his wacky ideas at first, they were no. We've tried it. It doesn't work. You gotta go. And then they eventually realized they had a cash cow in their hands and brought that back in.
Right.
But yeah, it's there are bad Disney films that I would rather watch with my kids. But also just in the great canon, and I find it to be a great canon, the canon of fantasy, the canon of magical exploration. Because I do think that it can hold a lot of mirrors and just out of the box, contemplative ways of considering not just how the world is, but how the world could be. It's sort of in that same, I see it in that same way that sci-fi works, sort of technologically. I think magic and fantasy can work sort of socially, and societally and psychologically of there are these other things that we can consider, other realities that we can consider. Mm-hmm.
Or to bring home a point that a lot of people won't get unless it's cloaked in, something else.
You want to talk about fantastical characters, and they always got certain colors going on.
Do we want to discuss Bright?
That was I was gonna call it out, but yeah, man.
Film Bright. That my father, after watching, said they just don't understand. And I was we do. That's the problem.
That's the problem. We completely understand what's going on. But yeah, they're just so that's another movie that we won't be watching for the record. My children and I. But
it might be a classic by then.
That's impossible. And even if it is, we're still not watching it. It's still not gonna happen. You can watch that at a friend's house. Yeah, it's just in that sort of great canon, there's no reason to watch the not good iterations of that.
Yeah, no, I feel there's so much, especially from this time.
Yeah.
That it's just
it's this is not
just
something
why.
to revisit.
I would literally rather wait till you're 10 or 11 and watch The Prestige.
Right?
And just, and
The Illusionist.
Yeah. 2
phenomenal films came out at the same time, roughly the same plot, but both excellent.
No, they literally had the exact same plot. Like, I was like, did y'all not know you were working on the same film?
I think they released it like
for at least 2 years?
A month apart.
Yeah, but it was
like
still
to try to I'm sure that when they both finished, like both studios were like, oh snap,
we got duped. But yeah,
it's like Ants in A Bug's Life.
Yes,
but that was rooted in feud, so that's a little different.
Yeah. Bug's Life. But yeah, I also agree. This definitely would not be the one. If they wanted to see the Aly Michalka filmography, I would literally be like, I'd much rather you watch freaking Cowbells, which is saying a lot.
Saying a lot, man.
I could not stand that movie as a child. But I'd much rather that, or just watch her in Phil of the Future.
Yeah, that would be the.
That's the better version.
Yeah, just watch Phil of the Future.
But yes, I feel like I would also be like, all right, like this, there's no point. There's just no point. Don't do that to yourself.
Now you see it, now you don't. You know?
Now you won't. Now you will not see it.
And with that, I think we can let you guys go for the week.
We will catch you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.